from Luke chapter 24, verses 36b through 48. Jesus himself stood among them and said to them, "Peace be with you." They were startled and terrified and thought they were seeing a ghost. He said to them, "Why are you frightened? And why do doubts arise in your hearts? Look at my hands and my feet. See that it is I myself. Touch me and see, for a ghost does not have flesh and bones as you see that I have." And when he had said this, he showed them his hands and his feet. While in their joy they were disbelieving and still wondering, he said to them, "Have you anything here to eat?" They gave him a piece of broiled fish, and he took it and ate in their presence. Then he said to them, "These are my words that I spoke to you while I was still with you, that everything written about me in the law of Moses, the prophets and the Psalms must be fulfilled." Then he opened their minds to understand the scriptures, and he said to them, "Thus it is written that the Messiah is to suffer and to rise from the dead on the third day, and that repentance and forgiveness of sins is to be proclaimed in his name to all nations, beginning from Jerusalem. You are witnesses of these things." The Gospel of our Lord. On this third Sunday of Easter, the lectionary still has us in the day of resurrection. Easter Sunday we heard from Mark. Last Sunday we heard from John. This morning we hear from the Gospel of Luke about the happenings on the day of resurrection. And like last week's appearance of the risen Jesus, the first words out of his mouth are, "Peace be with you." It reinforces for us just how unnerving it must have been for the disciples to see someone who was supposed to be dead. It's no wonder that they thought they were seeing a ghost. And it reminds us that we need to put ourselves in the disciples' place to truly understand what it is to be followers of the resurrected Christ. Sometimes I wonder if we have become immune to the power behind the stories of Easter morning. Because we hear them every year, they can become overly familiar. And instead of being amazed and a little unnerved, Easter has deteriorated into an excuse to buy a new outfit for children or candy for Easter baskets. The power that caused the earth to quake, as the Gospel of Matthew reports, has been turned into an Easter bunny. If you've been paying attention, you've seen, as I have, Easter slipping into this mini Christmas in terms of commercialism over, say, like the past 15 years. A few years ago, I saw my first TV commercial advertising something for Easter, and I was like, "Oh no," I was stunned. I was like, the message of Easter has been corrupted along with the message of Christmas. It had baby chicks and baby bunnies. And you know that the company that spent the money to produce a TV commercial did so because they had a whole heck of a lot more to gain in sales. Today's gospel reminds us that Easter is anything but nice, warm, and fuzzy. And we hear words like startled, terrified, frightened. And even though you and I have been forewarned that Jesus has risen from the dead, I doubt that would do anything to alleviate our own fear if we were to encounter the risen one. We spent some time this week in Bible study talking about personal encounters with the risen Christ or with heavenly beings, messengers of God, that were in human form but were not human in the sense that we are human. Many people have these stories. Some of you are in this room. And I've been privileged enough to hear some of your stories. And invariably, linked to these encounters are words like frightened, startled, scared, or unnerved. those first disciples who we are told that while in their joy, they were disbelieving and still wondering. Their encounter with Jesus brought them joy, but they didn't know what to think. And I wonder if this is not what Easter faith is all about. To not know what to think, but rather to accept that with God all things are possible, even if we don't understand it. To realize that the power of God can do things like raise people from the dead, and to not be so arrogant as to think that God will not do what we cannot understand. To realize that God will send messengers to tell us of divine things that are filled with unexplained mystery. Mysterious things such as sins being forgiven and reconciliation being made possible. And that we are to be witnesses to these things. I teach in our confirmation class that the purpose of the church is to be witnesses to the love of God that has been made known to us in Jesus Christ. By definition, all you police officers out here, a witness is someone who sees something happen. However, no one knows that you're a witness until you tell what you have seen. So witnesses not only see something happen, they also tell what they saw. However, I think Officer Joe Friday would struggle with people of Easter faith because he wouldn't get just the facts then. Instead, he would hear stories filled with the impossible and mystery. Obviously, the credibility of a witness who tells of the impossible and things of mystery is immediately called into question. And it was the same for those disciples who first spoke of a dead man walking on the day of Easter. They were accused of telling idle tales. This is probably why people who have stories of encounters with the divine tell very few people, because they know they'll get a sideways glance. Their credibility will be questioned, and others might think they're just crazy. Our fears, just like the fears of the first disciples, are what Easter faith calls us to move beyond. To not let fear hold us back from witnessing to the God of resurrection, no matter how incredible it might seem. Easter faith is not just about seeing divine heavenly beings, but it is witnessing to the implication of those encounters. The implication that in Jesus Christ, death is transcended. The implication that our brokenness, our sin that causes the pain in the world is transcended, and that God can bring new life into these places of pain and brokenness. How does this happen, you might ask? Well, I can't exactly tell you how it all happens, for it is mystery looking for faith. But what I can tell you is that it looks something like these stories of resurrection that we hear this time of year for the past 2 weeks and again today. There's a common thread running through the stories we have and these in Scripture that connect them together. The power of resurrection that we encounter in life will ring true with the witnesses of those who have been before us. We will know that we are all, generation after generation, witnessing to the same truth. And all that we will be able to say for sure is that I know, that I know, that I know. I'm sure there's many in this room who can say, I know, that I know, that I know, that in these waters of baptism is the power to change a life. Don't ask me how. It's not easy witnessing to the resurrection. We must have, quote, the audacity of hope, unquote, to quote a rather famous person. For God calls us to look into the blackness of death and proclaim that new life will come. God calls us to look at the evil in our world and proclaim that good will overcome. And God calls us not to be afraid, but to trust that God's power of transformation is at work, whether we can see it or not. And God calls us to pass on this witness to others, to tell them, I've seen the Lord, for he is risen.
He is risen indeed.